everyone, this is Kelly, and I've been thinking about lately how my reading tastes have changed over the years. And I was thinking back to when I was younger, or like not really young, but like teens and in my 20s, and the kind of books I read then compared to the books I read now. And they're a lot different. So I was wondering what it would be like if I reread some of those books that were my favorites back then. So I'm kind of compiling a little TBR, I guess, and an experiment this summer where I'm going to reread some of the books that were my favorites from earlier and see how I would rate them today. And I wanted to go back quite a ways to where I probably won't remember a lot of the books, so I wanted to go back at least 10 years. And since I'm in my mid to upper 30s now, I decided to go back to like books I read in high school, college, and my early 20s. So that would be like from the time I was like 15 to 25. And to give you like a time period, that also is from about like 96 to 2006, I would say. And so that's kind of the range of when these books are. Some of them are books obviously that were written before that, but that's when I read them, was in that 10-year time period. And to like add to the nostalgia, I decided to find the outfit that was like the oldest thing I owned. And so I looked in my closet, and this shirt is from when I was in college. I went to Capital University in Columbus, Ohio. So this, as far as I can tell from my cursory look, is the oldest shirt that I own. So this shirt would have been from about 2001, 2002. So it's, where does that make it, like 16 years old? All right, and so I did not look at any of the synopsis for these books. I picked some of my favorites and my favorite authors and from back then, and I just decided that I would guess the synopsis based on what I remember from more than 10 years ago. So these are the books I'm going to read this summer and kind of intermingle them with books I read now and kind of see how I feel about them. And Eliza's going to spend this video choking me. I just know she is. So the first one, in high school, The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck was the first book that I had to read for school that I remember liking. And I remember this being about a family during the Great Depression. I remember there being a lot of traveling and a lot of talk about dust. And that is actually all I remember. Oh, and I remember at the end there being like a whole like maybe scene about breastfeeding. That really is all I remember about this book. That might be completely inaccurate. I don't know. So we'll see. And then my next one, this isn't, I used to read like the same authors like over and over again. Like I would have a favorite author and I'd read all their books. So this is an author that I really loved back in high school, and that was Iris Johansen. And I read a ton of her books back then. But this was the book that I probably have read like, I don't know, at least 5 times when I was in high school and college. It's called The Ugly Duckling. And from what I remember, this is about a woman who is kind of a plain Jane, but then she is, I don't know, because of her husband, like maybe she's been attacked by like the mob or some kind of bad people, and she survives, and then her face is replaced by a model's face, and so now she's like really pretty. So hence The Ugly Duckling, and kind of her how she hides still from the people that try to kill her. Yes, this is going to be really interesting hearing my synopsis from 10 years ago. The next one from high school is The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams. I'm just going to read the first one because that's the one I remember reading and enjoying in high school. And I know this is a sci-fi that's humorous about a guy who Earth is about to explode and he gets taken up by aliens in a spaceship and explores the universe for the first time as a hitchhiker. And then we're moving into kind of some college years. And the first book I remember as being like one of my favorites in college was Illusions by Richard Bach. This was, I think, written more in like the 70s. So it was not written at the time I was in, in the 70s. So it wasn't written when I was in college, but I was given it by somebody I worked at camp with. I worked at camps during the summer. And I just remember this being like my philosophy for life when I was in college. And it's all about a reluctant messiah, which is on the like title. It's The Adventures of a Reluctant Messiah, and kind of how you can do amazing things or something like that. We'll see. And the other author that I really loved back then was Nicholas Sparks. And the book I remember just like adoring was A Walk to Remember, which is about 2 high school students that are from different sides, different crowds. The girl is kind of like a goody two-shoes church girl, and then the guy is kind of a rebel, and them falling in love, and there being a lot of like crying. That I remember crying at the end and being sad like all Nicholas Sparks. So let's see how I would feel now. Let's see if I still cry. Another author that I loved to listen to on audiobook was Michael Crichton, and the book I remember really enjoying was Prey. And I think I'm going to listen to this on audiobook again, but I did get the book just in case. I just remember when I was younger loving the audiobooks of Michael Crichton because they were like, had enough action to keep you going, but then if you kind of got bogged down by his dry tone, the audiobook could get me through it. And this one was about nanobots or something like that, like tiny little robots that were created to help people do things, but then they kind of develop a mind of their own, so kind of like AI. And the prey would be, the humans were the prey. And then another author that I read a ton of was James Patterson. This is Along Came a Spider, which is the first book in the Alex Cross Mysteries detective series. And I think I read like 12 Alex Cross books. There are a ton in that series. I mean, I think he's up to like 24 now. I gave up after about 12 because they got really repetitive. But I do remember the first few being really good from what I remember. So I want to reread the first one to see if it actually started out really good like I remember. And the only thing I remember about this plot, because they all kind of blend together, was that it took place in a school. And that's really all. And I think it was a private school maybe? I don't know. That's really all I remember about it. And then we're moving kind of into my post-college years, so these would have been my younger 20s. And back then I really liked Jodi Picoult, and one of my first ones I read by her was My Sister's Keeper, which this is a pretty famous book, so people probably know what it's about two sisters, and the one sister has been sick her whole life, and the other sister was actually kind of, given birth by her parents as a means to have a DNA compatible, basically like organ farm and blood farm for her sister. So her whole life she has been giving, oh, you're getting a little grumpy, giving blood and parts of herself to her sister, and she gets to a point where she's tired of it and kind of goes to court to emancipate herself. So it takes partly in place in court and is family drama. And then I got into, in my early 20s, the Dan Brown books. This is Angels and Demons. This is the illustrated version that they had at my library, so it is huge. So I don't know if I'll read this version or if I'll try to get the audiobook, because this is like a giant book to read from. And I read the whole like Da Vinci Code kind of series, except for the newest one that came out. But I remember the one that I liked the most was this one, the first one. This is kind of actually, I think, a prequel, because I think Da Vinci Code came out first and then this one, but this one takes chronologically place first, I think. So it's kind of a mystery, takes place in Italy from what I remember, and involves a monk that beats himself. That's all I remember. Isn't that pretty sad? And I do remember the ending, but I'm not going to tell you. But I remember thinking that's very far-fetched. That's all I remember about it. And then I have a couple standalones that I'd only read like one book from these authors and really loved them. And this one is Where the Heart Is by Billie Lette. And this is the book that the movie Where the Heart Is based off of. And it's about the Walmart baby, so the woman who gives birth to her baby in a Walmart, and she's kind of like homeless because she's deserted there by her boyfriend that got her pregnant, and her like finding a home in Oklahoma where this takes place and getting to know the people in the town and raising her daughter there. And I just remember being a heartwarming story, and I remember the book being more detailed and more about the people of the town than the movie, and that I really enjoyed that. So I'd like to kind of visit that again to see if I would still feel that way. And then the next one also became a movie. This is The Death and Life of Charlie St. Cloud by Ben Sherwood. And this is the book that the movie Charlie St. Cloud is made off of. And I read this when it first came out, so it was way before the actual movie came that has Zac Efron in it. And I just remember loving this book when it came out. I remember sitting in my bunk at camp, because I worked at camp when I was in my 20s as well, and just like absolutely loving it. And it's about a guy who can talk to dead people, and he lives in a cemetery because he wants to be able to talk to his younger brother who died, and that's the way he can see him, as being in the graveyard near him. And then he like kind of, it's a love story about him falling in love with a woman, but it centers around the whole graveyard scene. And then I read a bunch of books by Gregory Maguire, who wrote Wicked, in my 20s, and the one that I remember really liking was Confessions of an Ugly Stepsister, which is just Cinderella told from one of the stepsisters' point of view. And I don't remember anything about the story, I just remember liking it. And as of the ones that I read by him, it being the least weird and the most interesting, because Wicked was very, very strange, and I remember Mirror Mirror not being that interesting. It was about Snow White, but it wasn't as good. So this one I remember being good, so I'd like to see if I still think it would be good now. And then the last one, this is an author that I really liked in my 20s, which was Janet Evanovich. And she writes a lot of like romance books, but this series, this is Four to Score, this series is about a bounty hunter in New Jersey, and it is just comical and funny. And I listen to these on audiobook, so I'll probably try to listen to this on audiobook, but my library doesn't have it. And the library book app that has it on audiobook, I think I'm like 4th in line to get it, so it might be a while before I get it, so I might just read it because it's short. But I just remember these being like super funny and quirky and weird, and I did read like I think the first 10, and there's a ton of them. But I have a tendency to give up if series lasts for a long, long time, because I'm like, okay, there's a point where you get tired of reading about the same characters over and over again. There needs to be an end, and a lot of those people don't end their book series. They just keep going forever, like Alex Cross and this one, Stephanie Plum books. They just go on forever, and there's a point where I'm like, I'm done. So you never get a conclusion, but I remember being quirky and fun. So those are the books that I'm going to read this summer, interspersed throughout, and then I'll give you an update about what I think, if any of them still are good, or if I think they're trash now. Or some of them might just be good for nostalgia's sake. I might just have kind of memories of the past. So I'm interested to see if I like some of those books from before. And I might throw in some movies I enjoyed back then. Some of my favorite movies, like Wet Hot American Summer was my favorite movie in my 20s. And The Newsies, when I was in high school, they'll like, it is a Broadway show now, but it was a Disney movie back in high school. And in college, my favorite movie was Fight Club with Brad Pitt and Edward Norton. So maybe I'll check out some of those movies that I haven't seen in like 10 years and see if I would enjoy them as well. And I'll give you an update. If any of you read those books way back when and remember whether you like them or not, share with me. Or if there's ones that you're excited about me reading and reviewing because they might turn out to be like really crappy, then let me know and I might get to those first. Alright, see you later. Can you say bye-bye? We'll talk to you later.